Hey there, thinkers. Welcome back to another episode of Critical Hit. My name is S.
And I'm Finn, and today we're going to be talking about an article from IGN Middle East. This is about Square Enix. If you don't know, they make Final Fantasy, they make some of the bigger RPG games out there, Dragon Quest. And this article comes from IGN, and originally from Bloomberg, but it goes, Square Enix loses nearly $2 billion in value since Final Fantasy 16. And the new report cast doubt on ability to recover. So we're going to talk about this article, we're going to get into it here. And we're going to discuss what this article means, kind of what this means for the company, and if we actually believe that this is a downfall of the once mighty RPG kingmaker.
Squaresoft.
Squaresoft, I like that. Squaresoft. Square Enix, of course, after the merger. So let's get into the article, and we're going to discuss a little bit. So Square Enix has lost nearly $2 billion in value since launch of Final Fantasy 16 in June. And a new report has cast doubt on the company's ability to recover. Shares in the company have plummeted nearly 30% since Final Fantasy 16 came out on June 22nd, closing on September 13th at their lowest point since May last year. And yeah, it's lost a third of the value of the company. It's actually just over.
A little bit.
But a third of the value of the company or so is lost at the moment. That's a pretty big deal. It's worth, I'm going to equate, so they actually trade on a Japan stock exchange, and they trade in yen, but I'm going to just convert it here and say they went from about a $6 billion valuation to about a $4 billion. Yeah, it's a pretty big deal. But what it kind of doesn't take into account is, number one, to run a company, how much your company is valued at, let's say, isn't the biggest deal in the world, unless you're trying to get like a corporate bond issued, or you're trying to maintain your job as a CEO. Sure, it can, the stock market, they say, has predicted like the last 14 of the last 3 recessions, so the free market is really good at predicting downfalls, let's say.
It's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off for them.
I don't think that affects Square as much as we're led to believe, or at least as much as the articles are saying it does. Because does it affect their ability to operate? Well, cash flow affects that. Is cash flow relevant to your company value? Again, unless you're trying to get a corporate bond of some kind, or try to sell your own shares because you can't pay the bills, then realistically it doesn't actually affect you on your daily operating process. But as we get further into the article, the PlayStation 5 exclusive sold 3 million copies during launch week, a figure that sparked a debate online about whether it had met Square Enix sales targets, and Square Enix told IGN in July sales of Final Fantasy 16 were extremely strong, and insisted the game had sold relative to the PS5 install base. Or sold well relative to it, I should say. So IGN source familiar with the performance of Final Fantasy 16 confirmed sales had slowed considerably since launch, but the game was not yet considered a disaster. Earlier in September, Square Enix announced Final Fantasy 16 is set for 2 paid DLCs, and confirmed a PC port was officially in development. If you haven't actually played Final Fantasy 16, and you're an old fan, so let me get this out of the way first. I started with Final Fantasy, I'm going to call it 2, for you haters out there. It's Final Fantasy 4, of course, but when I played it back on the SNES, it was Final Fantasy 2. And, I loved it. I fell in love with Squaresoft at the time. Played all their games up until Final Fantasy, I think it was 9, they were still called Squaresoft, and then, of course, when 10 came out, I think that was when around the transition to Square Enix. It was actually for a movie that came out at the time that's, better than you're probably going to remember it if you go back and watch it now, but definitely didn't do well for Square at the time. And so, of course, they merged with Enix, another massive Japanese company. So they're in control of some of the bigger RPGs, Dragon Quest, Final Fantasy. I guess those are the 2 biggest ones they got. They got a couple smaller ones out there. But Final Fantasy 16 is a fantastic game. It's really a return to form, it feels like, for Final Fantasy. I thought Final Fantasy 15 was okay. The second act is really falls down.
Or that lightning character bothered me.
That's 13. Yeah, 13 was... I didn't like how linear 13 was, actually. It didn't really feel like a Final Fantasy game to me. Wasn't a massive fan. We played 14. Mm-hmm. 14. And honestly, of all the MMOs out there right now, it is probably the best one, if you're an MMO fan. Again, sorry to the haters who have something else in mind.
One that I can be swayed to go back to at some point.
I even played 11. 11 was not for everyone, I'll put it that way, but it was kind of slow, but it was good. But, ever since Final Fantasy 10, I want to see, they kind of, almost lost their way a little bit. 12 was okay, but 16 is definitely a fantastic game if you haven't played it. It really returns to form in a lot of ways that you expect of Final Fantasy. Now, I know it's heavily influenced by Game of Thrones as well, and that comes through in it, but if you haven't played it, Just highly suggested. And 3 million copies for PS5 exclusive, I don't think is a terrible sales figure for a first week.
Well, no, not really a PS5 exclusive, but it should be like hurting their. Well, obviously it's hurting them. For like being in an SD type of era, you'd think that we wouldn't be just in exclusiveness since everything's so digital.
Well, I mean, Sony and Square have had a long history.
Like, yeah, regardless.
A long history of doing really, really well. Ever since Final Fantasy VII came out on PlayStation 1. It was supposed to be on Nintendo.
Exclusive.
Kind of falling out. Yeah, and it's kind of been exclusive. I almost want to say I associate PlayStation with Final Fantasy. It's always that way for me. Mm-hmm. I don't know if it will change in the future. I mean, they're a massive game production company, so I would assess that they're probably going to make some kind of changes in the future. But I like that they release on PlayStation, but I don't see why they couldn't release on others as well. But yeah, 2 paid DLCs, and I honestly, another thing I want to get to here is, I'm going to show you their stock real quick. So on the screen, this is a Square Enix holding company, and you can see I kind of highlighted the day that Final Fantasy 16 came out. And did it go poorly for Final Fantasy 16? This is the weekly here. Let me go down to the daily. Did it go poorly for Final Fantasy or Square after Final Fantasy 16? Yeah, it looks like it did. It looks like it did, absolutely. But when did their financials report end? And I got that too. So their financials actually ended on June 30th. The report goes from April to June. And so a lot of the sales data for Final Fantasy 16 isn't even out yet. This is really tracking data like from Forspoken, or still what was going on for like Marvel, the Avengers. This isn't actually encompassing all the sales data you would have for Squaresoft in this case. So, is it fantastic look for their stock? No, you dropped a third of your value. But I don't think it takes into account Final Fantasy 16 incredibly well. Now, the stock market does always think ahead of people, 6 months to a year ahead of everyone else.
Hey, this is shit. It's shit.
But having said that, that's only predictions again. We won't actually know what they had for financials yet. So you can say they didn't do well all you want, but until next quarter, we won't know for sure. So I'm actually going to bring back up their financial report. I actually went through it, so no one else has to. So this is Square Enix and their financial report.
Because the spoof.
It is fairly lengthy. I'm just going to break it down though like this. So yeah, their revenue's down. Absolutely. Their whole assets are down. Yeah, they're down. I think it was by 8 million yen. I want to say 8 million yen, or maybe it was 8 billion yen. Their entire company is down overall for assets, cash flow, everything, all combined. But here's the real thing. Their profit was down about 70%, but they're still making profit. They made about $43 million US last quarter. Now it's about a 70% drop from what they've been seeing, but they made money. And so, yeah, you could say it's on a decline, but they made money.
We didn't make as much as we projected that we would.
And yeah, that's absolutely,
that's
it will affect.
What it is.
It will affect earnings per share. Absolutely, it will affect how people see your stock. But when we compare that to other companies going through right now, other entertainment companies, let's just compare it to Disney that we covered a lot, covered their financials. Disney is losing money, billions every year. Warner Brothers is losing money. Like, all these people are losing money, and we still think they can come back from it. I'm just saying, I know Square only makes games, but Square's still making money. It's just making less.
Very presumptuous.
It's not going out of business is what I'm trying to get to here. It's definitely not going out of business. They're going to be okay. Now, if this is a start of a trend that you see where they actually start to lose money, that's when you start to get worried. But for now, they're still making money. They're cash flow positive. And, as long as they don't have any massive investment they can't secure some kind of loan for, I think they're okay. Most places want to give you money if you're making money. So,
well, if Disney or Warner Brothers were having these numbers, they would have like record-breaking years.
Yeah, so this is the financial report. I can include a link if anyone wants it down here. But it's just an 11-page article about what they did for their earnings. A whole bunch of numbers. And like I said, that's kind of the synopsis there. So as we get back to the article, so this is Final Fantasy VII Rebirth Summer Game Fest trailer. You can see it here. That's the second part of the Final Fantasy VII remake. But a new report from Bloomberg painted a bleak picture of Square Enix, which reported a sharp profit decline in August, about 70%. It wasn't fantastic. That was year over year. And analysts told the publication that Final Fantasy XVI failed to make up for the poor performance of previous Square Enix flops, such as Marvel's Avengers and Forspoken. So Forspoken, that was their attempt at, I want to say their attempt at DEI, which they kind of should have stayed clear of. Now, I don't think that's the reason it failed. I think the reason it failed was Luminous Studios just made a terrible game. Or, I shouldn't say terrible, made a very boring game. It was almost like their answer to Hogwarts Legacy. It was just an incredibly less fun game. But then you got Marvel's Avengers. The single player experience was okay, but games as a service model is just, I don't like it. I think the best one out there is probably Destiny, but I don't like any game really that does games as a service because and that you have to have an amazing loop, and after 2 hours of playing Marvel's The Avengers, that loop was gone for me. And I couldn't even pick it up again. I was like, no, this game's too much. It wasn't enough to keep you there playing over and over again. So as this says, that's really these games are what the financials are based off of, not Final Fantasy 16. It's easy to equate Final Fantasy 16 to the fail, but that's not one.
Made games like the Marvel's Avengers or the Forspoken, which did they just close those 2 studios in Ontario or like in Quebec or something like that?
No, Luminous made Forspoken, and that was also a Japanese company, and actually from what I read, they just gave them too much leniency to do what they wanted without a lot of oversight. Marvel's The Avengers, I almost want to say was a Montreal studio for them. Yeah, it could have been.
Yeah, and they just said they closed those ones.
But they didn't close, they sold. They sold them to Embracer Group. Actually a pretty good deal, I think, overall for their Western studios. And really, I think they were just trying to consolidate what they were doing and get back to their basics. And their bigger kind of tentpole games overall and have more oversight over them, which I think is a good way to go actually for Square overall. Like, look at Dragon Quest XI. If you haven't played that game, also, I'm not a big fan of Dragon Quest games.
Dragon Quest Builders, if you haven't played that, that's a good game.
But Dragon Quest XI has a fantastic story to it if you haven't played it. And if you guys ever want...
stories.
Don't spoil it. But if you guys ever want a game review, I'm happy to review some games. We usually do movie reviews, but also happy to review games as well if anyone ever wants that. I'm happy to tell my thoughts on these in a more, let's say, comprehensive and succinct way instead of this rant here.
I'm your huckleberry.
But getting back into this, yeah, they had mobile games that shut down. So that was like Final Fantasy VII First Soldier. That's the root of the problem. Sources told Bloomberg is that the producers were given full reign over the scope and direction of projects, which goals can shift without warning. The upshot of this volatility in the quality of the final product. Yeah, they didn't have a lot of oversight, and that's what happened exactly with Luminous Studios. And they already shut it down. Like, they've said, yeah, that was your chance, kind of, and they didn't do well. Square Enix does have a new CEO, and like I said, that's the biggest worry when you're the CEO and your shares fall so much, is that you might get replaced. They have a new one. Otherwise, it doesn't affect your day-to-day operations as much as you might think it does. But apparently, the rebuild of development practices. So you know what Square's biggest problem is? I don't want to say they're greedy. They're not like EA, or they could be more for the fans. I always imagined that if Square was ever in trouble, they would have kind of break this glass here to get us out of trouble, and that was going to be a Final Fantasy VII remake. Well, and they've done that now, and they have another 2 parts coming at least that I know about for this.
With the Keyblade.
Yeah, with the Keyblade. For Kingdom Hearts lover, sure. I'm going to say Gunblade. I like that one better. But, I think that they've done a great job at bringing their old games to life. If you haven't played the Final Fantasy VII Remake, I mean, it doesn't just rehash old things. It definitely brings about a new aspect and story going forward. And Square has a whole bunch of old IPs that they're bringing out again. I bought Sega Frontiers just the other day on Steam. And and going down to doing other ones too. So next game's coming out, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Star Ocean, the second story. If you haven't played Star Ocean, the second story, I would say it's definitely the best one of all the series. There's going to be some end-of-timers out there that won't agree with me. That's okay. I'll fight you. But no, it's fantastic if you haven't played it. Really, really good story, and I've heard they're actually expanding on it, like Square usually does. They make their old games. They don't just bring them back. They tend to improve them.
Like Final Fantasy VII.
Yeah, well, even Chrono Cross, which came out on Steam. When it first came out, there was a lot of errors and it had a pretty low score on Steam. But now the user score is back up to, like, I think overwhelmingly positive at this point, because they really implemented everything people wanted to make it good. And again, their old games were what drew me to Square, and I'm super happy to see them to continue to be a company, because I do think they're probably one of the best companies at being able to tell a really good story in an RPG. Mm-hmm. I don't know about the best anymore, but they're at least in the top 5, so why would I ever want something like that to disappear? Square has their name on a lot of games out there. They are a production company, so a lot of different developers will produce through Square. So it's not always a Square game per se, but they're really a rather large company out of Japan. But I just want to say that I don't think this is as big a deal as everyone's making it out to be. I don't think Square is failing anytime soon. I think they're okay.
It's not Final Fantasy's problem. It's not their fault.
I don't think. Yeah, it's definitely not
Yeah.
Final Fantasy 16's fault.
No.
I think that it will have legs. It's a fantastic game. Sure, Square's made some missteps, but I think they will get back to form, especially with selling some of their Western studios and just focusing on what they do best.
Exactly. And once they start realizing what people actually remember what they do like, then, you know, they might be able to sell some more copies.
Yeah, well, they got Rebirth coming out next year, so you can guarantee that their financials are going to do well in the first quarter. It's supposed to be early first quarter next year, because that is like Square's bread and butter.
Oh yeah, for sure.
But anyways, like I said, I don't think Square is in as much trouble as anyone says they are. They're still going to be around for a while, and we can still enjoy some good old-fashioned Final Fantasy games.
Perfect.
Yeah, but and if you guys want more reviews of games, like I said, let me know. If you want more reviews of movies, we can go back doing that. That's fun too. But that's all I got. You anything else?
No, I have nothing else to do.
Perfect. Well, thanks for sticking with us till now. Appreciate you as always, and let us know what you think of this in the comments. Let us know if I missed something, and otherwise, we'll see you in the next video.
See you guys in the next video. Toodles!
Bye, guys.